the lead investigator at Skinwalker Ranch, has just quit.
What we captured on those cameras wasn't just unexplained. It was aware. It knew we were there. It knew where every camera was positioned. With that being said, I am leaving Skinwalker Ranch.
Dr. Travis Taylor, one of the most credentialed scientists in America, multiple doctorates, decades working on classified government projects, the lead investigator at Skinwalker Ranch, has just quit after viewing footage that showed something so disturbing, so unexplainable, that he walked away from the most mysterious location on Earth. And Brandon Fugel's response is raising even more questions than answers. Dr. Travis S. Taylor holds not one, not two, but multiple advanced degrees from major universities. We're talking about a doctorate in optical science and engineering, a separate doctorate in aerospace systems engineering, a master's degree in physics, a master's degree in astronomy, and a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering. This man has spent his entire adult life studying the most complex and challenging problems in science and engineering. But his credentials go far beyond just academic achievements. Travis has worked extensively for the United States Department of Defense on classified projects that the public will never know the details of. He's consulted for NASA on cutting-edge aerospace programs. He's been involved in developing advanced propulsion systems, weapons technology, and surveillance systems that remain classified to this day. He holds security clearances that grant him access to some of the most sensitive information in the United States government. He's authored over 25 peer-reviewed scientific papers published in major journals. He's written technical documents for government agencies that will never be declassified. He's appeared on legitimate science programs like The Universe and Rocket City Rednecks, where he explained complex physics and engineering concepts to general audiences. His reputation in the scientific and defense communities is stellar. This is not someone who jumps to conclusions or gets easily fooled by ambiguous evidence. When Travis Taylor joined the Skinwalker Ranch investigation team in 2020, it was a game changer for the entire operation. His involvement legitimized the project in the eyes of the broader scientific community. Suddenly, this wasn't just a fringe paranormal investigation. This was a serious scientific endeavor led by someone with the credentials and experience to back up every claim. Travis brought equipment to the ranch that most civilian researchers could only dream of accessing: sophisticated spectrum analyzers, radiation detection systems, electromagnetic field monitors, LiDAR mapping technology, and experimental sensors that aren't even available to the public yet. His approach was methodical, systematic, and deeply skeptical, which is exactly what the investigation needed. So now that you understand who Travis Taylor is and why his departure is so significant, let's talk about what actually happened. According to multiple sources close to the investigation who spoke on condition of anonymity, the incident occurred during a late-night surveillance operation in the Eastfield area of Skinwalker Ranch. Now, for those of you who follow the ranch investigations closely, you know that the Eastfield has been a hotspot for anomalous activity for years. This is the location where the team has documented some of the most intense and frequent unexplained phenomena. We're talking UAP sightings captured on multiple independent camera systems, electromagnetic disturbances powerful enough to cause complete equipment failures, strange animal behavior including cattle absolutely refusing to enter certain areas even when food is present, and multiple instances of human investigators experiencing unexplained physical symptoms ranging from nausea to temporary vision problems. The team had decided to conduct what they called a maximum coverage surveillance operation in this location. The goal was to have every possible sensor, every possible camera, every possible detection system focused on this area simultaneously, so that if anything happened, they would capture it from multiple angles with multiple types of equipment, all timestamp synchronized to the millisecond. The equipment array they deployed was absolutely massive. Infrared cameras positioned at 6 different angles around the perimeter, thermal imaging systems capable of detecting heat signatures from over a mile away, electromagnetic spectrum analyzers monitoring everything from low-frequency radio waves all the way up to gamma radiation, sensitive radiation detectors that could pick up even the slightest particle emissions, motion sensors using both passive infrared and active microwave technology, and high-definition night vision cameras recording at 4K resolution, all feeding data back to the command center in real time. The surveillance operation began at sunset, around 8:30 p.m. Mountain Time. Travis was positioned in the command center, which is located approximately 300 yards from the Eastfield location, monitoring all the feeds on multiple screens. Security personnel were stationed at strategic positions around the perimeter. Everyone was in radio contact. They settled in for what they expected to be a long night of careful observation. And for the first several hours, absolutely nothing unusual occurred. The equipment registered completely normal baseline readings. The electromagnetic spectrum was quiet. No thermal anomalies appeared on the infrared systems. No radiation spikes. No motion detections except for occasional wildlife passing through the area. By Skinwalker Ranch standards, it was an unusually calm and uneventful evening. Some team members were even joking that maybe the phenomena had decided to take the night off. Then, at exactly 2:47 a.m., everything changed in an instant. At 2:47 a.m., every single piece of equipment in the surveillance array registered an anomaly at the exact same moment. And I mean exact, down to the millisecond, according to the timestamp synchronization. The electromagnetic field monitors spiked to levels that should have required a massive power source somewhere in the immediate vicinity, something equivalent to a major electrical substation or a powerful military-grade radio transmitter operating at full capacity. But there was nothing there. No power lines, no vehicles, no equipment that could possibly generate that kind of electromagnetic signature. The radiation detectors surged beyond their safe operating parameters so dramatically that the systems automatically shut down to prevent damage to the sensitive instruments. The thermal imaging cameras detected a massive heat signature that didn't correspond to any known animal, any vehicle, any natural phenomenon that the team had ever documented. And the night vision cameras captured something that, according to those who have seen the footage, defies any conventional explanation. One source close to the investigation, speaking on condition of anonymity because they're not authorized to discuss the details publicly, described the footage as showing a structured object that appeared to materialize out of thin air, completely solid and three-dimensional, that hovered in a completely stationary position for approximately 30 seconds without any visible means of propulsion, support, or attachment to anything, and then dematerialized in a way that violated multiple fundamental laws of physics as we currently understand them. The object wasn't blurry, it wasn't ambiguous. It wasn't some distant light that could be explained as an aircraft or satellite. According to the descriptions, this was a solid, structured object, clearly visible on multiple camera systems simultaneously, with defined edges and what appeared to be a metallic or highly reflective surface. But here's where the incident takes an even stranger turn. What allegedly disturbed Travis the most, what ultimately became the breaking point that led to his decision to leave the project entirely, wasn't even the object itself. It was what happened immediately after the object vanished from view. The cameras captured what appeared to be a humanoid figure standing in the exact location where the object had been hovering just seconds before. And this figure didn't walk into frame from the darkness. It didn't approach from any direction that the motion sensors would have detected. It was simply there, instantly present, as if it had been deposited or left behind by whatever had just disappeared. The figure stood completely motionless for what witnesses estimate was about 5 to 7 seconds. And then, in what multiple people who've seen the footage described as one of the most unsettling and disturbing moments they've ever experienced, the figure slowly and deliberately turned its head directly toward the camera array, as if it knew exactly where every camera was positioned, as if it was fully aware that it was being watched and recorded. According to the detailed descriptions of the footage from those who have viewed it, the figure's physical proportions were fundamentally wrong in a way that immediately triggered a deep sense of wrongness in anyone watching. It was too tall, standing somewhere between 7 and 8 feet in height. The torso was too narrow, appearing almost skeletal in its proportions, and the limbs, particularly the arms, didn't move the way human limbs move. There was something about the joints, about the way they articulated or failed to articulate properly, that was profoundly disturbing to witness. Then, after those several seconds of standing completely still and staring directly at the cameras with what appeared to be deliberate awareness and intention, the figure began moving toward the camera array. But it wasn't walking, at least not in any way that resembled normal bipedal locomotion. The movement was described as unnaturally smooth and fluid, almost as if the figure was gliding or floating just slightly above the ground surface, covering distance without any visible leg movement, without any of the natural weight shift and balance adjustments that you would expect from any walking creature. Travis, who was monitoring all of the feeds in real time from the command center 300 yards away, immediately grabbed the radio and transmitted an urgent message to the security team positioned near the east field. Evacuate the area immediately. Get away from that location right now. But before any of the security personnel could even respond or acknowledge the transmission, something unprecedented happened. Every single camera in the array went completely dark simultaneously. Not a gradual power failure where systems shut down one by one. Not a signal interruption that might cause flickering or static. Just instant, complete, total black across every single camera system at the exact same moment, as if something had reached out and switched them all off with perfect synchronization. When the full team returned to the East Field area the following morning at first light, they found physical evidence that something extraordinary had occurred in that location. The ground where the figure had been standing, where it had materialized after the object vanished, was scorched in a perfect circular pattern approximately 8 feet in diameter. The grass within this circle was completely burned away, reduced to ash and scattered by the morning breeze. The soil itself appeared to have been subjected to intense heat, fundamentally changed in both texture and color from the surrounding earth. And here's what's truly disturbing. The soil temperature in that circle was still measurably elevated 12 full hours after the incident occurred, registering nearly 15 degrees Fahrenheit higher than the surrounding ground temperature. Whatever had happened there had released or generated enough energy to fundamentally alter the physical properties of the Earth itself. The electromagnetic readings in that exact spot remained anomalous for 3 complete days afterward, displaying bizarre fluctuations and patterns that made absolutely no scientific sense given that there was no power source, no equipment, nothing in that area that could possibly be generating or influencing electromagnetic fields. But here's where the story takes an even more disturbing turn, and this is the detail that I think really explains why Travis made the decision he did. When Travis went back and reviewed the footage frame by frame, analyzing every single frame of video that was captured before the cameras went dark, he noticed something that wasn't visible during the live monitoring, something that only became apparent when you slowed the footage down and examined it with extreme scrutiny. In the final frames before the cameras cut out, in the very last images that were captured, the figure appeared to be looking directly at the camera lens with what seemed like intentional focus, and in what appeared to be the reflection of its eyes, assuming they were eyes in any conventional sense, there appeared to be symbols or patterns of some kind. These weren't random shapes or visual artifacts caused by the camera system or compression. They were geometric patterns, precise and deliberate and clearly intentional, that didn't match any known human language, any mathematical notation system, any symbolic representation that Travis could identify despite his extensive education and access to classified databases. Travis spent the next 72 hours essentially locked in the analysis room, barely sleeping, barely eating, completely obsessed with understanding what he had captured. He reviewed every single second of that footage hundreds of times. He ran enhanced images of those symbols through every database he had access to, and given his security clearances, that includes databases that the general public doesn't even know exist. He consulted with colleagues in linguistics, cryptography, theoretical mathematics, symbolic systems analysis, and even reached out to experts in ancient languages and archaeological symbols. Nothing matched. Nothing even came close to providing any kind of framework for understanding what those symbols might represent or mean. And that's when, according to multiple sources who spoke with Travis directly during this period, he experienced what can only be described as a fundamental shift in his understanding of what was happening at Skinwalker Ranch. Up until this point, despite all the strange phenomena he had documented, despite all the unexplained events, Travis had maintained his scientific optimism and his belief that sufficient data and rigorous analysis would eventually reveal rational explanations. But this incident, this particular combination of the object, the figure, the biological effects, and especially those symbols, represented something that Travis could no longer fit into any framework of conventional science or even unconventional theoretical physics. This wasn't just unexplained. This was something that seemed to demonstrate awareness, intention, and purpose. This was something that appeared to be deliberately interacting with the investigation team. One source quoted Travis as saying during this period, "When you're studying a phenomenon in science, there's supposed to be a clear separation between the observer and the observed. You're watching something, measuring something, analyzing something, but you're separate from it. But what happens when that fundamental relationship reverses? What happens when the thing you're trying to study starts studying you back? What happens when it demonstrates not just awareness of your presence, but specific knowledge of your methods, your equipment, your intentions? That's not a phenomenon anymore. That's an intelligence. and that changes everything about how we need to approach this. Travis told colleagues the East Field footage suggested deliberate intentionality. The object appeared exactly where the most sensitive equipment was positioned, as if it knew the surveillance array's location. The figure materialized where the object had been, suggesting a clear connection. It moved directly toward the cameras with obvious purpose. Those symbols seemed like a message or warning that the team was exploring forbidden territory. But Travis wasn't just worried about immediate safety. He was concerned about what investigating these phenomena might be unleashing or awakening. A theory developed among team members that Travis came to embrace. Skinwalker Ranch isn't just where strange things happen randomly. It's where dangerous things are deliberately contained. The property might sit on top of something meant to remain undisturbed, a dimensional rift, an ancient structure, or something we can't comprehend. Every sensor deployed, every excavation conducted, might be weakening whatever containment was put in place thousands of years ago. Travis expressed concern that escalating anomalous events weren't random, they were direct responses to investigation. Quote, "What if we're not discovering something dormant? What if we're waking something up?" When news of Travis's departure circulated, everyone wanted Brandon Fugel's response. How did the ranch owner, who's invested millions into studying the property, react to losing his lead investigator? Fugel released an official statement. Dr. Travis Taylor, one of the most credentialed scientists in America, multiple doctorates, decades working on classified government projects, the lead investigator at Skinwalker Ranch, has just quit after viewing footage that showed something so disturbing, so unexplainable, that he walked away from the most mysterious location on Earth. And Brandon Fugel's response is raising even more questions than answers. This isn't just another Skinwalker Ranch story. This is different. What Travis saw on those cameras changed everything. Before we can fully understand the significance of what happened and why Travis's departure is such a massive deal, we need to establish exactly who Dr. Travis Taylor is, because this context is absolutely critical. This isn't some paranormal enthusiast who got spooked by shadows. This isn't a reality TV personality chasing ratings. This is one of the most legitimately credentialed scientists working in America today. And Brandon Fugel's response is raising even more questions than answers. This isn't just another Skinwalker Ranch story. This is different. What Travis saw on those cameras changed everything. They found them at dawn. Dozens of coyote bodies piled beneath the Skinwalker Ranch sign like some kind of grotesque offering. No wounds, no blood, no signs of struggle or predation, just dead animals stacked in a pattern that made the security team immediately call for scientific backup. And when Dr. Travis Taylor arrived on scene, the first thing he said was, "This violates every principle of natural animal behavior I know." Within 48 hours, officials from multiple agencies descended on the property. Wildlife biologists, federal investigators, veterinary pathologists. And after examining the scene, reviewing the overnight security footage, and conducting preliminary autopsies, they made an unprecedented decision. Label the incident as potentially paranormal in origin, because nothing in conventional science could explain what happened to those coyotes or why it happened at Skinwalker Ranch. Subscribe now, because what we're about to reveal will challenge everything you thought you knew about what's possible at America's most paranormally active property. It was March 17th when Dragon, Skinwalker Ranch's head of security, made his routine morning patrol of the property perimeter. The sun was just coming up over the Utah desert, casting long shadows across the 512-acre ranch. Dragon had been doing this patrol for years, checking fence lines, examining overnight camera footage, making sure nothing unusual had occurred during the night hours when the ranch is most active. But as he approached the main entrance, the weathered sign reading Skinwalker Ranch visible in the early light, he saw something that made him stop the vehicle immediately. A massive pile of what appeared to be animal bodies directly beneath the ranch sign. From a distance, he couldn't identify the species, but the sheer number of carcasses was immediately alarming. Dragon radioed base camp immediately. His voice, normally calm and professional even when reporting strange phenomena, carried an edge of genuine concern. "We have a situation at the main entrance. Multiple animal casualties. I need the science team out here now." He didn't approach the pile initially. Years of working at Skinwalker Ranch had taught him that unusual scenes should be documented before being disturbed. When the initial response team arrived, they confirmed what Dragon had seen. Coyotes, dozens of them. At least 40 bodies, possibly more, stacked in what appeared to be a deliberate pile directly directly under the ranch entrance sign. The arrangement wasn't random. The bodies were layered, almost organized, in a way that suggested intentional placement rather than natural accumulation. But what immediately struck everyone present was what wasn't there. No blood, no visible wounds, no signs of struggle in the surrounding dirt, no tracks other than the coyote's own paw prints leading to the location, and perhaps most disturbing, no scavenger activity. In the Utah desert, dead animals attract scavengers within hours. Ravens, vultures, other coyotes, insects, but these bodies appeared untouched by any other wildlife. The team immediately secured the scene and began documentation. Photographs from multiple angles, video recording, measurements of the pile's dimensions, an account of the bodies, which eventually reached 43 individual coyotes of varying ages and both sexes. That number itself was significant. Coyotes are typically solitary hunters or operate in small family groups. To have 43 individuals in one location simultaneously violated normal behavioral patterns. Dr. Travis Taylor, the ranch's chief scientist, was off property that morning, but was immediately contacted. His response was to drop everything and drive directly to Skinwalker Ranch, calling in additional expertise en route. Because even over the phone, hearing the description of what had been found, he knew this wasn't a natural occurrence. And he knew that whatever investigation followed would need to be documented meticulously because the findings were going to be extraordinary. Dr. Travis Taylor arrived at Skinwalker Ranch 3 hours after the discovery. As an astrophysicist and aerospace engineer with decades of experience in scientific investigation, Taylor approaches anomalies with rigorous methodology. He's investigated everything from advanced propulsion systems to unexplained aerial phenomena. But as he later told colleagues, nothing in his scientific background prepared him for the scene beneath that ranch sign. Taylor's first action was to establish a controlled perimeter and ensure no one had disturbed the scene beyond initial documentation. He needed to preserve evidence integrity before conducting detailed analysis. Then he began his examination, starting with the overall scene configuration and working down to individual carcasses. The pile's arrangement immediately struck him as non-random. The bodies were oriented in a pattern, heads generally pointing inward, with larger individuals at the base and smaller ones toward the top. That kind of organization doesn't happen naturally. When animals die in groups, whether from disease, poisoning, or environmental factors, they fall randomly. This looked arranged. An arrangement implies intelligence and purpose. Taylor examined individual carcasses for signs of trauma. In his own words, captured on the investigation video, "I'm looking at these animals and I see no external injuries, no gunshot wounds, no signs of blunt force trauma, no indication of predator attacks. These coyotes didn't die from physical violence. So what killed them?" The condition of the bodies presented another puzzle. They appeared to have died recently within the past 12 to 18 hours, based on rigor mortis and environmental factors. But there was no decomposition smell, which should have been present in 40-plus dead animals even after just hours in the desert heat. Taylor noted this absence repeatedly during his examination, clearly troubled by the implication that normal biological processes weren't occurring as expected. Most disturbing to Taylor was the behavioral impossibility of the scene. Coyotes are intelligent, cautious animals. They don't congregate in large numbers. They're territorial. They avoid areas with heavy human activity. For 43 coyotes to be in the same location simultaneously, close enough to end up in a pile together, violated everything known about coyote social behavior and territorial patterns. Taylor made a statement that would later be widely quoted. "In 30 years of scientific investigation, I've never encountered a scenario where the evidence so completely contradicts established behavioral and biological principles. Either we're missing something fundamental about coyote behavior, or something happened here that doesn't fit into conventional scientific frameworks. And given that this is Skinwalker Ranch, I'm inclined toward the latter explanation." His immediate recommendation was to conduct full necropsies on multiple specimens, test for toxins and disease, review all overnight security footage, and bring in additional experts with specialized knowledge in wildlife pathology. Because whatever had happened here, Taylor knew it was going to require expertise beyond his own to even begin understanding. Skinwalker Ranch maintains extensive security camera coverage, including multiple angles on the main entrance where the coyote pile was discovered. The overnight footage was immediately pulled and reviewed, and what it showed was as disturbing as the pile itself, because the cameras captured the coyotes arriving, but what they didn't capture was any clear cause of death. The footage begins at approximately 11:47 p.m. the previous night. The area area under the ranch sign is empty, normal nighttime scene. Then at 11:52 p.m., the first coyote appears on camera, walking normally. No signs of distress or unusual behavior. It approaches the area beneath the sign and simply stops, stands there, completely still. Over the next 43 minutes, more coyotes arrive. They come from different directions, appearing at the edge of camera range and walking directly to the spot beneath the sign. Each one displays the same behavior: approach, stop, stand motionless. They don't interact with each other, don't show any signs of aggression or fear, just converge on this specific location and freeze. By 12:35 a.m., 43 coyotes are standing in a group beneath the ranch sign. The footage shows them all motionless, not pacing, not looking around, just standing in absolute stillness in a formation that's becoming increasingly organized and dense. Then, at 12:41 a.m., something happens that the review team watched repeatedly, trying to understand. All the coyotes collapse simultaneously, not gradually, not in sequence, all at once, as if someone had cut their strings. They drop to the ground in perfect synchronization. And here's what makes it impossible. There's no visible cause, no flash of light, no sound on the audio track, no object entering frame. They simply all fall at exactly the same moment. Dr. Travis Taylor analyzed this footage frame by frame. His observation: the synchronization is too perfect to be coincidental. We're talking about 43 individual animals dropping within the same half-second window. The probability of that happening randomly approaches zero. Something caused this, something that affected all of them simultaneously, and whatever it was, it's not visible on our camera systems. The footage continues for another 6 hours until dawn. During that entire time, nothing approaches the pile. No scavengers, no other coyotes, no wildlife at all. The area is completely avoided by every other animal species, as if they could sense something wrong with the location. That avoidance behavior continued for 3 days after the bodies were removed. But there's one more detail in the footage that investigators found deeply unsettling. At 3:17 a.m., approximately 3 hours after the coyotes collapsed, there's a brief electromagnetic interference spike on all camera feeds. The image pixelates for about 4 seconds. When the feeds clear, the coyote bodies have been rearranged into the neat pile that was discovered at dawn. Something moved 43 dead coyotes into an organized configuration during those 4 seconds of interference. And there's no visible evidence of what did the moving. 6 coyote carcasses were transported to a veterinary pathology facility in Salt Lake City for comprehensive necropsy. The team conducting the examinations included 2 board-certified veterinary pathologists and a wildlife disease specialist. They approached the autopsies expecting to find poisoning, disease, or some other identifiable cause of death. What they found instead was medical impossibility. The external examination revealed no trauma whatsoever. No wounds, no bruising, no broken bones, no signs of struggle. The animals appeared physically pristine, except for being dead. Internal examination showed all major organs present and, bizarrely, appearing normal. Heart, lungs, liver, kidneys, all looked healthy on gross examination. But tissue samples told a different story. Under microscopic examination, cells throughout the coyotes' bodies showed signs of catastrophic failure. Not gradual degradation like you'd see in disease or poisoning. Instant cellular death. As if every cell in their bodies had simultaneously stopped functioning. One pathologist described it as looking like the animals had been switched off at a cellular level. Toxicology screening found no poisons, no drugs, no environmental toxins. Blood chemistry was normal except for elevated stress hormones, suggesting the animals experienced extreme fear immediately before death. But there was no identifiable cause for that fear response, and stress alone doesn't cause instantaneous death in healthy animals. Dr. Travis Taylor attended the necropsy presentations and asked pointed questions about the cellular damage patterns. Could radiation cause this? Answer: no. The damage pattern was wrong and there was no radiation detected. Could electromagnetic pulse cause this? Answer: theoretically possible, but would require field strength that would have fried all the ranch's electronic equipment. Could sound frequency cause this? Answer: unlikely, and no unusual acoustic signatures were detected on the overnight recordings. The pathology team's official report concluded, cause of death cannot be determined through conventional veterinary pathology. The cellular damage observed is inconsistent with any known natural or man-made agent. This conclusion, essentially admitting that medical science couldn't explain how these animals died, was unprecedented in the pathologist's combined 40 years of experience. One additional finding troubled everyone involved. Brain tissue examination showed unusual activity patterns in the neurons, specifically in areas associated with fear response and motor control. The patterns suggested the animals had been experiencing intense terror and had simultaneously lost voluntary muscle control. They were conscious and terrified, but unable to flee, and then something killed them all at once. The mass coyote death triggered involvement from multiple government agencies. Utah Division of Wildlife Resources sent field investigators. The USDA's Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service dispatched disease specialists. Even the FBI's liaison for unusual incidents in federal territories made inquiries, given Skinwalker Ranch's proximity to restricted airspace and government installations. Wildlife officials initially suspected poisoning, possibly from illegal predator control efforts by neighboring ranchers, but field investigation found no evidence of bait stations, no toxins in soil samples, and testing of the carcasses ruled out all common and uncommon poisons. The hypothesis was quickly abandoned. Disease was the next avenue of investigation. The CDC was consulted about potential novel pathogens. Rabies, distemper, and other known wildlife diseases were ruled out through testing. The pathology findings of instant cellular death didn't match any known disease progression, and the fact that no other wildlife in the area showed any signs of illness eliminated epidemic explanations. Environmental factors were examined extensively. Electromagnetic anomalies, radiation, toxic gas seepage, infrasound. Every measurable environmental variable was tested, and nothing abnormal was detected except during that brief 4-second window of camera interference when the bodies were rearranged. And nothing abnormal was detected except during that brief 4-second window of camera interference when the bodies were rearranged. And that anomaly itself couldn't be characterized beyond electromagnetic disturbance of unknown origin. After 3 weeks of investigation, a confidential briefing was held involving representatives from multiple agencies and the Skinwalker Ranch research team. According to sources present at that meeting, the discussion became heated when conventional explanations were exhausted. The evidence pointed to something that standard investigative frameworks couldn't accommodate. The decision to label the incident as potentially paranormal in origin came from that meeting. Not an official public statement, but internal classification used in government documentation. The terminology used was anomalous mass mortality event with characteristics suggesting non-natural causation. In government bureaucracy, that phrasing is as close as agencies get to saying paranormal without using the word. Dr. Travis Taylor attended portions of that briefing and later stated, "When federal investigators, people who approach everything from a position of scientific skepticism, start using language that essentially acknowledges paranormal possibilities, you know the evidence has forced them into uncomfortable territory. These aren't people who believe in ghosts or UFOs by default, but they looked at the data and couldn't provide conventional explanations." The official public statement from Utah Wildlife Resources was carefully worded, "We investigated a mass mortality event involving coyotes at a private property. Cause of death could not be definitively established. The incident appears to be isolated and does not pose risk to public health or other wildlife." That bland statement concealed the extraordinary reality of what investigators had found, or more accurately, what they'd failed to find any normal explanation for. The coyote incident wasn't the first mass animal event at Skinwalker Ranch, but it was the largest and best documented. The property has a history of cattle mutilations, mysterious livestock deaths, and wildlife behaving in impossible ways. But this incident, with 43 coyotes simultaneously dying for no determinable medical reason, represented a significant escalation in both scale and strangeness. Dr. Travis Taylor and the research team began comparing the coyote incident to previous animal-related phenomena at the ranch. Patterns emerged. The incidents tend to occur in specific areas of the property. They often happen during periods of increased electromagnetic activity. They frequently involve behavior that violates known animal psychology. Animals approaching locations they should instinctively avoid, showing no fear response when they should flee, converging in groups when they should be solitary. Previous cattle mutilations showed similar impossible characteristics: surgical precision without tool marks, complete blood drainage without evidence of how it was removed, organs extracted without disturbing surrounding tissue. The coyote pile represented a different manifestation of the same underlying pattern. Whatever affects this property can interact with living creatures in ways that violate biological and physical laws. Taylor developed a hypothesis. The though he emphasized it was highly speculative. What if the phenomena at Skinwalker Ranch can exert some kind of control over biological systems? Not just observation, which is what we see with the orbs and aerial phenomena, but actual influence over living things. The coyotes all arriving at the same location, standing motionless, dying simultaneously. That suggests external control at a neurological level. This hypothesis is disturbing because it implies intelligence and capability far beyond simple observation. If something at Skinwalker Ranch can compel animals to gather, paralyze them, kill them simultaneously, and then arrange their bodies, what does that mean for human safety? The ranch has had hundreds of visitors over the years. People work there daily. If the phenomena wanted to affect humans the way it apparently affected those coyotes, could it? Brandon Fugel, the ranch's owner, addressed this concern publicly. "We take safety extremely seriously. We have protocols. We monitor constantly, and we've never had a human injury related to paranormal activity. But I'll be honest, the coyote incident made us reconsider our understanding of what we're dealing with. This isn't just lights in the sky or equipment malfunctions. This is something that can affect living biology in profound ways." The pattern recognition extended beyond animal incidents. The electromagnetic interference that occurred when the coyote bodies were rearranged matched signatures from previous incidents where objects moved or equipment failed. The timing, always during overnight hours between midnight and 4 a.m., aligned with peak activity periods documented over years of monitoring. The location, directly beneath the ranch entrance sign, was symbolic in a way that suggested intentional messaging. Taylor's conclusion: whatever is happening at Skinwalker Ranch isn't random. It follows patterns. It seems to have preferences for certain locations and times. It responds to human presence and investigation. And critically, it appears to be escalating. The phenomena are becoming more dramatic, more frequent, and harder to dismiss as misidentification or equipment error. The coyote pile represents a threshold moment where denying intelligent causation becomes more difficult than accepting. When conventional explanations fail, speculation begins. Scientists, researchers, and paranormal investigators have proposed multiple theories about what could cause the type of mass mortality seen in the coyote incident. None are satisfying. All raise more questions than they answer. Theory 1. Advanced directed energy weapon. Some speculate that military testing of classified technology could explain the incident. A weapon system capable of targeting biological systems, inducing cardiac arrest or neurological shutdown from a distance. But this theory has problems. Why would military testing occur at a private ranch? Why would the government allow investigations if they were responsible? And what kind of weapon arranges bodies after killing? Theory 2. Electromagnetic anomaly of natural origin. Utah's geology includes unusual mineral deposits and underground formations that could theoretically produce electromagnetic effects. But Dr. Travis Taylor addressed this directly. "We've surveyed this property extensively with ground-penetrating radar and electromagnetic sensors. Yes, there are geological features. No, none of them explain synchronized biological shutdown of 43 animals. Natural EM fields don't work that way." Theory 3. Infrasound or ultrasound frequencies. Certain sound frequencies can affect animal behavior and potentially induce fear or disorientation. Some researchers propose that underground geological activity or equipment malfunction could have produced frequencies that affected the coyotes, but acoustic analysis of the overnight recordings showed no unusual sound signatures, and sound frequency doesn't explain the pile arrangement. Theory 4. Paranormal entity or intelligence. This is where the speculation becomes uncomfortable for scientifically minded researchers. The theory suggests that Skinwalker Ranch is inhabited by or attracts some form of non-human intelligence capable of affecting physical reality. The coyotes were compelled to gather, paralyzed through unknown means, killed simultaneously, and their bodies arranged as either a message or a territorial display. Dr. Travis Taylor, when pressed on which theory he found most plausible, gave a careful response. "I'm a scientist. I deal in evidence and testable hypotheses, but I'm also honest about what the evidence shows. We have documented phenomena that don't fit conventional frameworks. The electromagnetic signatures, the synchronized biological effects, the apparent intelligence behind the arrangement. All of this points to something we don't understand operating by rules we haven't discovered. Whether you call that paranormal or just extremely advanced unknown technology, the practical result is the same. We're dealing with something beyond current scientific explanation." Theory 5. Interdimensional or quantum effects. Some physicists consulting on Skinwalker Ranch investigations have proposed that the property might be experiencing effects from quantum phenomena or even interdimensional bleed-through. This theory suggests that what we perceive as paranormal activity is actually natural physics, operating at scales or in ways we don't yet understand. The coyotes might have been affected by localized alterations in space-time or quantum field fluctuations. Each theory attempts to bridge the gap between documented evidence and possible explanation, but they all share a common problem. They require accepting that something extraordinary is occurring. Whether it's classified military technology, unknown natural phenomena, non-human intelligence, or exotic physics, any explanation for the coyote incident forces us to acknowledge that our understanding of reality is incomplete. And for most people, that's more disturbing than any specific theory. Something happened at Skinwalker Ranch that nobody is talking about. The cameras stopped rolling. Experiments that had been running for months were suddenly halted. Crew schedules were wiped clean. And the silence that followed wasn't the comfortable quiet of a production break. It was the heavy silence of something gone terribly wrong. The timeline is crucial to understanding what happened. In late spring of last year, production was in full swing. The team had scheduled a series of experiments designed to test a hypothesis they'd been developing over multiple seasons, that specific locations on the ranch responded to electromagnetic stimulation in ways that suggested intelligence or at least complex reactive systems. Camera crews were on site daily. Travis Taylor and the scientific team were running constant tests. Eric Bard was analyzing data streams in real time. Dragon, the ranch's security chief, was monitoring the perimeter. Everything was normal. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon in early June, everything changed. Filming stopped mid-experiment. Not paused, stopped. Equipment was powered down. The crew was sent home, and the official explanation was deliberately vague. Technical difficulties requiring assessment. But here's what made people suspicious. Production crews know the difference between a normal pause and an emergency shutdown. In normal circumstances, you finish the day's shoot, wrap equipment properly, schedule the next session. This was different. Sources close to the production describe it as abrupt. One moment cameras were rolling, the next everyone was being asked to leave immediately. Experiments that had taken weeks to set up were abandoned mid-process. The crew schedules tell the story. Up until that Tuesday, every day for the following month was blocked for filming. By Wednesday morning, those schedules were completely cleared. No explanations, no new dates, just blank calendars and a memo about indefinite postponement pending further review. People who'd worked in television production for decades said they'd never seen anything quite like it. The speed, the totality, the lack of communication. Perhaps most telling was the simultaneous silence from everyone involved. Travis Taylor, who regularly engaged with fans on social media, went quiet about ranch activities. Brandon Fugel, the ranch's owner who'd been open about experiments, stopped discussing current investigations. Crew members who used to share behind-the-scenes photos suddenly posted nothing from the ranch. It was coordinated, deliberate, the kind of silence that comes with NDAS and serious legal implications. This wasn't planned downtime. Production breaks are announced. Seasonal gaps are expected. This was something else entirely. A full stop in the middle of active investigation, leaving equipment in place and experiments unfinished. Whatever happened that Tuesday didn't just pause the show. It changed the entire trajectory of how the ranch would be investigated going forward. The experiment that preceded the shutdown was relatively routine by Skinwalker Ranch standards. The team was conducting electromagnetic testing in an area known for high strangeness, using a combination of RF spectrum analyzers, magnetometers, and high-speed cameras. They'd done similar tests dozens of times. This should have been unremarkable. What made this different was the consistency of the anomaly. In past experiments, strange readings would appear briefly, spike, then disappear. Interesting, but inconclusive. This time, multiple instruments detected the same phenomenon simultaneously, not just one sensor malfunctioning or picking up interference. Every piece of equipment, calibrated independently, registered identical anomalies at precisely the same time. According to sources familiar with the data, the readings didn't match any known category. It wasn't standard electromagnetic interference from power lines or radio towers. The signature was completely different. It wasn't geological activity. Seismographs showed no corresponding movement. It wasn't atmospheric. Weather conditions were stable. And it wasn't equipment failure, because once they swapped in backup instruments, the readings continued unchanged. But here's what really disturbed the team. The anomaly had structure. It wasn't random noise or chaotic signals. It showed patterns. repetition, sequences that suggested organization. One researcher, speaking anonymously, described it as looking less like natural phenomena and more like data transmission, as if something was broadcasting on frequencies they happened to be monitoring. The data was concerning because it didn't fit into comfortable categories. UAPs can be explained away as misidentified aircraft or atmospheric phenomena. Geological anomalies can be attributed to unique mineral compositions or underground structures. Electromagnetic interference can be blamed on equipment or distant sources. But data showing clear structure, perfect synchronization across multiple independent systems, and patterns that suggested intentional organization, that was something different entirely. This wasn't interesting data that would make for a compelling episode. This was concerning data that made scientists stop and reconsider whether they should be conducting these experiments at all. Because if something was responding to their tests, if something was broadcasting back, then the fundamental assumption underlying the investigation was wrong. They weren't just observing passive phenomena, they were interacting with something active. The data review session that followed the experiment revealed something that shouldn't have been possible. Conflicting readings that violated basic physics were appearing simultaneously. Instruments detecting electromagnetic fields in ranges that should have required massive power sources, yet thermal imaging showed no heat signatures. Radiation detectors registering particles that left no trace on film or digital sensors. Audio equipment picking up frequencies below human hearing range, but sound pressure meters showing no corresponding waves. Scientists on the team started using a term they'd avoided throughout the entire investigation: impossible. Not unlikely, not unexplained, impossible, because the data sets were mutually exclusive. If instrument A was correct, instrument B's readings couldn't exist. If instrument B was functioning properly, instrument A's data violated known laws. Yet both were calibrated correctly, both were functioning as designed, and both were recording contradictory realities. Then came the detail that made everyone stop talking and start genuinely worrying. The signals didn't stop when they shut down the equipment. Standard protocol after capturing interesting data is to power everything down, verify the anomaly disappears, then power back up to see if it returns. This helps eliminate the possibility that your own equipment is creating the phenomena you're trying to measure. They shut down every piece of electronic equipment on the ranch. Generators, computers, sensors, everything. The baseline readings should have dropped to near zero. Instead, the signal persisted. Not as strong, but definitely present, which meant whatever they were detecting existed independent of their observation. It was there whether they were measuring it or not. And somehow, impossibly, their instruments were still detecting it even when powered off. But the truly disturbing realization came when they analyzed the pattern over time. The signal wasn't random, it wasn't consistent, it was adaptive. During the first hour of testing, it appeared in one frequency range. When they focused their instruments on that range, it shifted to another. When they broadened their monitoring, it split across multiple frequencies. It was as if something was testing their capabilities, learning what they could detect, adjusting its behavior accordingly. This crossed a fundamental line in scientific investigation. You can study phenomena that don't understand they're being studied. Weather doesn't know you're measuring it. Geological formations don't care about your seismographs. But if something is responding to observation, if it's adjusting behavior based on how you're measuring it, then you're not conducting passive research anymore. You're engaged in an interaction, and interactions can go both ways. Before this experiment, safety concerns at Skinwalker Ranch focused on practical matters. Don't stand under the drilling rig. Wear protective equipment during rocket launches. Maintain safe distances from high-powered laser and RF equipment. Standard industrial safety protocols for the kind of testing they were conducting. But after this data came back, the conversation about safety changed fundamentally. Medical monitoring of team members had been routine throughout the investigation. Blood work, basic physicals, standard stuff to ensure nothing on the ranch was causing obvious health problems. But in the days following this particular experiment, several team members reported symptoms that couldn't be easily explained. Severe headaches that lasted for days, sleep disruption, vivid dreams that multiple people described in eerily similar terms, a general sense of unease that persisted even after leaving the property. One researcher described it as feeling watched, even at home, hundreds of miles from the ranch. Another reported technology malfunctions that started after the experiment. Phones dying randomly, computers crashing, electrical systems in his house behaving strangely. Were these symptoms connected to the experiment, psychosomatic responses to fear, or something else? The team couldn't say with certainty, and that uncertainty was itself concerning. Dr. Travis Taylor, who'd been advocating for increasingly aggressive testing to provoke responses, suddenly started talking about protocols protocols, and caution. Sources say he had conversations with Brandon Fugal about whether they were exposing the team to something they didn't understand and couldn't protect against. Not physical danger. You can wear protective gear and maintain safe distances, but psychological or neurological effects that might not show up on standard medical tests. The phrase that kept coming up in internal discussions was informed consent. Everyone on the team had agreed to investigate strange phenomena. They'd signed waivers acknowledging physical risks, but nobody had consented to exposure to something that might affect consciousness or cognition in ways medical science couldn't predict or treat. How do you get informed consent when neither you nor your subjects understand what you're dealing with? This was the moment when the investigation stopped being about discovery and became about exposure, about whether pushing for answers was worth potential harm to the people doing the pushing, and critically, about whether continuing to provoke responses was making things worse. Because if the phenomena could adapt, if it could respond, if it could somehow affect people even after they left the property, then every experiment wasn't just gathering data. It was escalating an interaction that nobody fully understood. Anyone who's watched the show closely over multiple seasons can see the shift. Certain locations on the ranch that were featured prominently in early episodes quietly disappeared from later investigations. Not because they stopped being interesting, because they became too concerning to continue studying with cameras rolling and crew members present. One area in particular, a section near the East Field, was the focus of intense investigation in the first 2 seasons. High radiation readings, strange lights, equipment malfunctions, classic Skinwalker Ranch phenomena. Then, after a specific incident that was filmed but never aired, that zone was quietly removed from the rotation. Experiments started happening everywhere else on the property. That particular location stopped appearing in episodes. The official explanation when fans noticed was simple. They were exploring other areas of the ranch to get more comprehensive data, but people familiar with the production tell a different story. After the incident, a decision was made at the highest levels that this area would be monitored remotely only. No personnel on site during active phenomena, no film crews. The zone wasn't abandoned because it was uninteresting. It was cordoned off because it was too active. What makes avoidance revealing is context. Throughout the show's run, the team has deliberately put themselves in uncomfortable situations, flying helicopters in areas known for equipment failure, digging in zones with radiation concerns, conducting experiments that they knew might trigger reactions. These aren't people who scare easily or avoid risk, so when they collectively decide that a location is off limits for direct investigation, it tells you something significant happened there. Sources describe the incident that led to the decision as a near miss, not physical danger in the traditional sense. No one was injured, but something happened during filming that made everyone present extremely uncomfortable. Multiple crew members refused to return to that specific area. Insurance concerns were raised, and Brandon Fugal made the call that whatever data they might gather wasn't worth the risk to personnel. The lesson here is important. Some areas aren't off limits because they're empty or explained away. They're restricted because they're too full of activity that nobody wants to interact with up close anymore. Observation from a distance is one thing. Direct exposure is something else entirely, and the decision to maintain distance after years of aggressive investigation speaks volumes about what they experienced in that zone. One of the strangest aspects of the shutdown involves the delayed reaction to footage. During filming, everyone on site was focused on equipment, data streams, and immediate observations. The atmosphere was professional, scientific, controlled. Yes, strange things happened, but in the moment, with cameras rolling and a job to do, people stayed focused on documentation. The unease came later, during the review sessions when editors started going through raw footage frame by frame, when producers watched everything that had been captured without the distraction of being on site. That's when people started seeing things that nobody noticed during actual filming. Details in the background, patterns in the data visualizations, sequences that didn't make sense when viewed in isolation, but became disturbing when seen in context. One editor described the experience as watching something change the longer you looked at it. He'd review a segment, mark it for inclusion, then come back to it hours later and see something different. Not literally different, the footage hadn't changed, but his perception of what was happening in the frame had shifted. Details that seemed insignificant during the first viewing became prominent. Patterns emerged that he couldn't unsee once noticed. Multiple crew members reported that reviewing footage affected them more than being on the ranch during filming, which doesn't make logical sense. You'd think direct exposure would be more impactful than watching recorded video in a comfortable editing bay. But the repeated viewing, the ability to pause and examine frames, the process of trying to understand what they'd captured, that's what got under people's skin. Then came the reports from people who worked on the footage off-site, away from the ranch entirely. Editors in Los Angeles, color correction specialists scientists in New York, sound designers who never set foot in Utah. They started reporting strange experiences, dreams about the ranch, a sense of being observed while working on specific segments, technology problems that seemed concentrated around footage from particular experiments. This is where things get genuinely unsettling. If phenomena could somehow extend beyond the physical location through recorded media, then documentation wasn't a safe distance observation anymore. It was a vector. Every copy of the footage, every hard drive, every review session, potentially extending whatever was happening at the ranch to people who'd never been there. The real shock didn't come from being present during the experiments. It came from trying to understand what had been captured afterward. Networks shut down productions for predictable reasons. Budget overruns, declining ratings, cast conflicts, safety violations, standard entertainment industry issues that happen all the time and get resolved through normal business processes. What happened with Skinwalker Ranch wasn't any of those things. The show was profitable, ratings were strong, the team worked well together. By every conventional metric, production should have continued. But there's a difference between a ratings problem and a liability problem. Ratings can be fixed with better marketing or format changes. Liability issues, especially ones involving crew health and safety, require immediate action and careful legal review. When multiple people start reporting psychological effects, when medical concerns arise, when insurance companies start asking questions, that's when network executives get involved directly. Sources within the network describe a series of high-level meetings that happened in the days following the shutdown. Legal teams were consulted, insurance carriers were notified, medical professionals were brought in to evaluate crew members. This wasn't creative executives discussing storylines. This was risk management trying to understand potential exposure and liability. The decision to pause production came from above the show's production team. Brandon Fugel owns the ranch and could have continued private investigations. The core team wanted to keep working. But when a network's corporate structure gets involved, when lawyers start reviewing what happened rather than producers, that signals a fundamental shift from entertainment concerns to legal and safety concerns. What makes this shutdown different from past controversies or production problems is the speed and completeness. Past issues with paranormal shows have led to format changes or cast replacements. This led to a full stop. No announcements about retooling, no statements about when filming might resume, just vague mentions of technical issues and ongoing assessment, the kind of corporate language that indicates serious concerns being discussed privately while public statements remain deliberately uninformative. Someone higher up decided this shouldn't continue, at least not in its current form. Whether that decision was driven by genuine concern for crew safety, fear of legal liability, or something else entirely, we may never know. But the fact that it happened, that a successful show with strong ratings was shut down mid-season without clear explanation, tells you everything about how seriously this situation was taken at the highest corporate levels. Every reality show captures far more footage than ever makes it to air. For every hour of television, you might shoot 30 or 40 hours of raw material. Most of what gets cut is boring. Equipment setup, failed takes, conversations that don't advance the narrative. But sometimes footage gets cut for other reasons. Because it doesn't fit the show's format, because it raises questions the producers can't answer, because it's too ambiguous to include but too clear to completely dismiss. Skinwalker Ranch has an archive of footage that was never meant to be aired, experiments that produced results too strange to contextualize in a television format, moments where equipment behaved in ways that suggested either massive technical failure or phenomena beyond current explanation, crew reactions that were too genuine, too unsettled to fit the show's somewhat measured scientific tone. One particular piece of footage, described by multiple sources but never publicly released, shows an experiment where everything went wrong at once. Multiple equipment failures, data streams contradicting each other in real time, and in the background, something visible on thermal cameras that shouldn't have been there. Not a person, not an animal, something that registered heat in patterns that didn't match any known biological signature. The footage was reviewed extensively, enhanced, analyzed by multiple experts. The consensus was that it showed something real, something physical enough to register on multiple sensors, but what it showed couldn't be easily explained. It wasn't clear enough to definitively prove anything extraordinary, but it was too clear to dismiss as equipment malfunction or misidentification. It existed in the uncomfortable middle ground where debunking fails but proof remains elusive. The decision was made to keep this footage in the vault, not because it was boring or irrelevant, because silence can be a form of containment. If you can't explain something and you can't debunk it, sometimes the safest option is to not show it at all. Let people speculate about what might have been captured rather than giving them actual footage that raises more questions than it answers. This is where the shutdown Shutdown becomes most interesting from a disclosure perspective. Everything that aired on the show was carefully curated to be compelling but ultimately explainable within the show's framework. Mysterious but not definitively proven. The footage that never aired, that sits in archives under legal protection and non-disclosure agreements, that might tell a very different story. Not everything is debunked by science and skepticism. Some things are simply buried because they don't fit into comfortable narratives about what's possible. The question everyone asks is whether the ranch is still active without cameras, whether experiments continue privately, whether the phenomena that made Skinwalker Ranch famous persist when nobody is watching or documenting. The answer, based on everything we can piece together, is yes. Activity continues, investigation continues, but the nature of how it's being studied has fundamentally changed. Brandon Fugal has made it clear the ranch remains a focus of serious scientific investigation, but that investigation is happening differently now. More remote monitoring, more automated data collection, less direct human presence during active phenomena. The shift suggests lessons learned from whatever led to the shutdown. That proximity to certain events carries risks that can be mitigated through distance and technological intermediation. The patterns observed over years of investigation suggest that whatever happens at Skinwalker Ranch doesn't depend on human observation. The phenomena existed before the show. They'll exist after. Cameras and scientific instruments might make the events visible and documentable, but they don't create them, which raises an uncomfortable question. If filming stops but activity continues, what was the investigation actually accomplishing besides documentation? Some researchers argue that aggressive investigation, deliberately provoking responses, attempting to trigger phenomena through experimentation, might have escalated whatever exists there. That each rocket launch, each drilling operation, each electromagnetic pulse wasn't just observing passive phenomena, but actively engaging with something responsive, and that engagement potentially made things worse. The shutdown might represent a recognition that the paradigm was wrong. You can't treat intelligent, responsive phenomena like laboratory subjects. You can't provoke and measure something that might be measuring you back. The scientific method works beautifully for studying things that don't know they're being studied. It becomes problematic when the subject of investigation is aware of the observer and potentially capable of responding in ways that affect the observer. Looking forward, Skinwalker Ranch will likely remain an active research site, but the research will be more cautious, more respectful of boundaries that weren't clear until they were crossed, less focused on making compelling television, and more concerned with understanding phenomena without unnecessarily escalating interaction. Because the ultimate lesson of the shutdown is simple. Stopping observation doesn't stop activity, but it might stop whatever consequences come from aggressive investigation of things we don't yet understand.
Just minutes ago, information surfaced about a private mansion connected to Brandon Fugal, a place rarely discussed and never meant to be examined this closely. What began as a routine walkthrough quickly shifted when investigators encountered areas that were never listed, rooms that didn't appear on any plans, and evidence that raised immediate concern. Within moments, access was restricted and recordings were halted. Tonight, we break down what was reportedly found, why it was quietly buried, and what it could mean moving forward. Subscribe now, because stories like this don't stay hidden for long. And once you see what was uncovered, you'll understand why. The mansion tied to Brandon Fugal has always existed in a strange gray area. Publicly, it's described as nothing more than a private residence, another symbol of wealth and success. But those familiar with the property have long suggested that description barely scratches the surface. Unlike most high-end homes, this mansion was designed with layers of separation. Certain wings are isolated from the rest of the structure. Corridors subtly narrow, ceilings shift in height, and materials change in ways that feel deliberate rather than aesthetic. What immediately stands out is how little visual documentation exists. No detailed interior tours, no consistent floor plans. Even real estate records offer only broad outlines, lacking the specifics normally required for a property of this scale. People who have been inside describe a sense that the building wasn't designed to impress guests. It was designed to control movement. Sightlines are limited. Corners feel intentional. Sound behaves oddly in certain hallways, carrying farther than expected in some places, and dying completely in others. More unsettling is the timeline. Portions of the mansion appear newer than official construction dates suggest, while other sections seem far older than they should be. Renovations were reportedly carried out in phases, often without public permits, creating internal spaces that don't align with original blueprints. This alone raises questions, but it's the purpose behind these alterations that matters most. Homes are built for living, facilities are built for function, and this mansion leans heavily toward the latter. Those who reviewed partial layouts noticed entire sections labeled only with internal codes. No names, no descriptions, rooms without windows, storage areas without visible access points, even stairwells that appear to lead somewhere but abruptly end behind sealed walls. These aren't accidents, they're choices. And choices like this usually reflect something being protected, studied, or kept out of sight. By the time investigators stepped inside, it was already clear this was not just a residence. It was an environment designed to limit what could be seen, where people could go, and how much they could understand at once. And that realization set the tone for everything that followed. Because if the mansion itself was built to hide something, the real question becomes simple and unsettling. What required this much secrecy in the first place? Entry into the mansion was originally approved under routine circumstances. The visit was framed as controlled, limited, and procedural, with clear boundaries established before anyone stepped inside. Specific rooms were cleared, specific paths were outlined, and specific areas were marked as off-limits, with no expectation that those restrictions would be challenged. At first, everything followed that plan. Doors opened where they were supposed to. Lighting activated normally. Movement was calm, measured, and uneventful. Then, something shifted. Without warning, access systems behaved differently than expected. A secured door responded to credentials that should not have worked. Interior lighting activated in a corridor that was not listed on the access itinerary. According to those present, the change wasn't dramatic at first. It was subtle. A pause, a glance exchanged, the quiet realization that they were standing somewhere they had not been authorized to be. What made this moment disturbing wasn't just the mistake, it was the absence of alarms. No alerts triggered, no automated lockdown followed. Instead, the system allowed continued movement, almost as if the deviation had been anticipated. Those inside later described the feeling as being guided rather than lost, led forward by the structure itself. Hallways narrowed, sound softened. The atmosphere grew noticeably heavier the deeper they went. Attempts to verify location through internal maps failed. Digital layouts no longer matched physical space. What should have been a short connector hallway extended far longer than expected, ending at a door none of the personnel recognized. This door lacked standard labeling, no warnings, no identifiers, just a reinforced surface and a manual locking mechanism that suggested it was never meant for casual use. It was at this point that protocol began to unravel. Communication slowed, decisions were second-guessed, and an unspoken understanding settled over the group. Whatever lay beyond this point was not part of the original plan, and someone had gone to great lengths to make sure it stayed that way. Beyond the unauthorized door was a room that immediately altered the mood of everyone present. It was not large, but it felt compressed, as if the space resisted being occupied. The walls were bare, unfinished in places, yet intentionally reinforced in others. There were no windows, no obvious ventilation, and no furnishings to suggest comfort or long-term use. The lighting inside did not match the rest of the mansion. It was dimmer, colder, and oddly directional, casting shadows that seemed to bend rather than fall naturally. The first thing noticed was the sound. Voices behaved strangely in this room, carrying too clearly at times, and then vanishing altogether mid-sentence. Footsteps echoed with a delay that didn't match the size of the space. Even small movements felt amplified, while larger sounds seemed swallowed. Several devices began to malfunction almost immediately. Audio equipment produced static. Cameras struggled to maintain focus. One recorder shut off entirely without warning. Temperature readings showed inconsistencies as well. Certain areas of the room were noticeably colder, while others felt unnaturally warm, despite no visible heat source. When handheld sensors were moved through the space, readings spiked and dropped erratically, as if the room itself was interfering with measurement. This was not environmental drift. It was localized and repeatable. What unsettled the group most was the sense that the room was not abandoned. Dust patterns suggested recent activity, yet there were no footprints, no tools, no signs of ongoing work. It appeared maintained without being occupied, preserved rather than used. One individual later described the feeling as standing inside a container rather than a room, something designed to hold more than just people. At that moment, attention shifted from curiosity to caution. This space did not exist by accident. It had been built deliberately, hidden carefully, and separated from the rest of the mansion for a reason. And as the group stood there in silence, one thought became impossible to ignore. If this room was meant to stay unseen, then simply entering it may have already crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. Once the room was documented, attention shifted to what was stored within it. These were not decorative items, nor were they consistent with anything found elsewhere in the mansion. Along the walls sat containers made from mixed materials, some metallic, others composite, each sealed and unmarked. No labels, no serial numbers, nothing that suggested public manufacture or consumer use. Whatever these objects were, they had been intentionally stripped of identity. Several items appeared to be tools, but their design didn't align with conventional purposes. Edges were smoothed where grip would normally be unnecessary. Weight distribution felt unbalanced in ways that made handling awkward. A few pieces emitted a faint hum when lifted, subtle enough to be dismissed at first, yet impossible to ignore once noticed. None of the items were powered, yet they behaved as if energy was present. More troubling was the condition of the storage itself. Everything was clean, not unused, but maintained. No corrosion, no dust buildup on the containers themselves. The surrounding floor showed signs of careful movement, as though items had been repositioned recently, then returned to precise locations. This wasn't forgotten storage. It was active without witnesses. Attempts to photograph certain objects resulted in distortion. Images appeared blurred or slightly offset, even when taken from close range. One device refused to save files altogether while pointed toward a specific container. When the lens was moved away, normal function returned. That behavior was repeated more than once. At this stage, the assumption that these were harmless materials collapsed. These objects served a purpose, and that purpose required privacy. They weren't trophies. They weren't collected curiosities. They were part of a process. And standing in that room, surrounded by items that resisted documentation, one conclusion became unavoidable. Whatever was happening inside this mansion was not meant to be explained. It was meant to continue uninterrupted. Once attention turned to documentation, the atmosphere inside the mansion shifted again. Cameras that had been operating without issue began to malfunction. One by one, recording devices stopped capturing usable data. Some powered down unexpectedly. Others continued running, but produced files that were either corrupted or completely empty when reviewed. At first, this was treated as technical failure. That explanation did not hold for long. Audio logs were the first to disappear. Timestamps remained, but the sound itself was gone, replaced by low static or silence. Video files showed brief moments of clarity before degrading into distortion. In several cases, recordings ended seconds before something came into frame, as if cut intentionally. No one recalled pressing stop. No commands were given. The footage simply ended. Shortly after, instructions were issued. Documentation was to pause. Certain areas were no longer to be filmed at all. Devices already used inside the restricted sections were collected and set aside, supposedly for review. Those devices were never returned in their original condition. Memory cards were wiped. Internal logs were missing. Even metadata had been altered in ways that suggested deliberate removal rather than system error. What stood out most was how quickly this response occurred. There was no confusion, no debate, no attempt to troubleshoot on site. The decision to restrict footage came immediately. as though the possibility had already been anticipated. Those present understood the message without it being stated directly. Whatever had been captured was not meant to exist outside that building. Later, when partial material surfaced, it was heavily edited. Transitions were abrupt. Key moments were absent. Context was removed. What remained felt sanitized, stripped of the very details that would explain why recording had been halted in the first place. At that point, it became clear that the most disturbing discovery was not a room or an object, but the reaction itself. You do not erase evidence unless it threatens something, and once footage is taken away, the story no longer belongs to those who witnessed it. As details from the mansion were quietly contained, attention turned to something harder to dismiss. The structure, the restrictions, and the response did not exist in isolation. Similar elements had appeared before at locations connected to Brandon Fugal, each time following the same trajectory. Initial curiosity, limited access, anomalies that resisted explanation, then silence. Architectural features overlapped in troubling ways, reinforced interior spaces, inconsistent layouts, rooms excluded from public records. At each site, witnesses described a shift in tone once certain thresholds were crossed, as if permission itself had layers. Even the language used afterward remained consistent. Nothing unusual, no threat, no reason for concern. Statements that explained nothing while closing every door. What made this connection unsettling was repetition. One unusual property can be dismissed as coincidence. Two can be argued as bad luck. But multiple locations sharing the same design philosophy and the same pattern of restricted discovery suggest intention. Someone was not reacting to events as they occurred. They were responding according to a plan already in place. When timelines were compared, another detail emerged. Each incident followed a similar sequence of escalation, then containment, access granted, then narrowed, documentation allowed, then revoked. Individuals involved became quieter over time, their public remarks increasingly vague. No single event stood out as the breaking point, because the breaking point was built into the process. This realization reframed the mansion entirely. It was not the origin of something disturbing. It was one node in a larger network of controlled spaces, each designed to reveal only what was necessary and only to the right people. The mansion did not raise new questions. It confirmed old ones that had never been answered. At that stage, the investigation stopped being about what was found inside a building. It became about why the same discoveries kept happening in different places, under different circumstances, yet always ended the same way, quietly, deliberately, and without explanation. When those involved finally exited the mansion, the effects did not end at the gate. In the hours that followed, behavior began to change in subtle but noticeable ways. Conversations became shorter. Messages went unanswered. Individuals who had been vocal during the visit suddenly avoided specifics, speaking only in general terms or declining to comment altogether. No one argued. No one protested. Silence settled naturally, as if it had been agreed upon without words. In public settings, the shift was even more apparent. Interviews that had been scheduled were quietly postponed. When questions were asked, responses were careful and controlled, stripped of emotion and detail. Body language betrayed unease. Eyes drifted, hands tightened. The confidence seen earlier was gone, replaced by restraint. Whatever had been encountered inside the mansion lingered, shaping reactions long after the physical distance grew. Privately, some participants reportedly requested to be removed from future involvement altogether. Others asked for reassignment away from similar environments. These were not dramatic exits. They were quiet withdrawals, framed as personal decisions or scheduling conflicts. Yet the timing was impossible to ignore. The mansion had been left behind, but its influence had not. What made these reactions troubling was their consistency. Different individuals, different roles, same response. No one contradicted the official narrative, yet no one reinforced it either. The absence of denial spoke louder than confirmation ever could. It suggested that speaking plainly carried consequences no one was willing to risk. By the time days passed, patterns hardened. hardened. Phones stayed silent. Statements stayed vague. No follow-ups came. The event was treated as concluded, yet no one acted relieved. The absence of closure became its own answer, hinting that what was seen could not be undone, ever. In the days that followed, the absence of explanation became impossible to ignore. No official statement clarified what had happened inside the mansion. No denial was issued. No confirmation was offered. Instead, there was a careful redirection of attention, a subtle shift away from specifics and toward broader, less threatening topics. Questions were acknowledged without being answered. The event was neither acknowledged nor disputed. It simply faded from public discussion. This type of response is rarely accidental. When something is harmless, it is dismissed openly. When something is misunderstood, it is explained. Silence, on the other hand, is reserved for situations where explanation creates more risk than secrecy. Addressing the discovery directly would have required acknowledging inconsistencies, missing footage, and restricted access, details that raise more questions than they resolve. What stood out most was how coordinated the silence appeared. Different voices, different platforms, same outcome. No leaks, no contradictions, no attempt to control the narrative aggressively, just a collective decision to let it dissolve. That restraint suggested confidence, not confusion, as if those responsible knew that time alone would bury the issue more effectively than confrontation ever could. Behind closed doors, conversations reportedly continued, but none reached the public. The absence of even vague reassurance hinted that reassurance was not possible. Any explanation would have required admitting that something unexpected had been encountered, something that could not be neatly categorized or safely discussed. So instead, the story was allowed to remain unfinished. This refusal to address the discovery directly did not calm suspicion, it intensified it. Silence created space for interpretation, and that space grew larger with every unanswered question. The lack of closure became the most revealing detail of all, because when those in control choose not to speak, it is often because the truth does not belong to them alone, and once spoken, it cannot be contained again. When the mansion finally fell quiet, the most important detail was not what had been found, but what followed. The absence of explanation, the removal of evidence, and the coordinated silence all pointed toward a single conclusion. This discovery was not an anomaly, it was confirmation. Whatever existed inside that mansion was already understood by those in control, and exposure was the real threat. Viewed this way, every decision makes sense. Restricted access was not about safety, it was about containment. Missing footage was not accidental loss, it was deliberate protection. Silence was not confusion, it was strategy. The mansion functioned as a checkpoint, a place where something ongoing could be observed, stored, or managed without public interference. This reframes the entire narrative. The mansion was never meant to shock the public, because it was never meant to be seen at all. It was designed to operate quietly, to exist without explanation, and to remain effective as long as curiosity stayed outside its walls. Once attention reached inside, the system responded exactly as it was built to. The unsettling truth is that nothing ended when the doors closed. Whatever process was underway did not stop. It simply moved beyond view again. The reaction was not damage control, it was maintenance. And that distinction matters, because maintenance implies continuity. If this discovery teaches anything, it is that secrecy is not always about hiding danger. Sometimes it is about preserving function. Some environments are hidden not because they are unstable, but because they are working exactly as intended. And that leaves one final question lingering in the silence. If this was only one location, carefully managed and swiftly contained, how many others exist that have never been questioned at all? That possibility, once considered, makes the discovery feel far less isolated. Indeed,